think we're live, Laraine. So hi, everyone. This is Jenny Nash, and welcome to our webinar today. I hope you guys are pumped because this is going to be an awesome conversation about writer's block. I'm really excited to have Laraine Herring here. So please come into the room and let us know that you're here so that we know you can hear us and everything is good. While we're waiting for you guys to do that, and please don't be shy, just let us know that you're here. Hi, Sienna.
Hey.
So what's going to happen is Laraine and I are going to chat for a while and have a conversation about some of these really rich topics from her book, and then we will open it up to your questions. So we'll be about an hour, and of course, as usual, we'll send out a recording. So if you have to go, don't worry, you will get the recording when we're finished. Hi, Steve and Lisa, Deb. I have arrived.
I love that one. I
have arrived.
I'm gonna leave that.
Anita from Denmark. Oh, how cool. Thanks for all your webinars. Well, thank you, Anita, for paying attention. That's awesome that you're following what we're doing, and Diana. So one quick thing I just want to tell you guys about is if we're on a Google Hangout here that's being recorded, and sometimes it gets a little glitchy. So if that happens, don't panic, just refresh your page and we should come right back. If we freeze, we'll come right back. Just hold on a minute and everything will be fine. And if you miss anything, you can catch it in the recording. Okay, so I think we can officially start. So I just want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name's Jenny Nash. I'm the founder and chief creative officer of Author Accelerator, which you can find at authoraccelerator.com. And Author Accelerator is an online program that gives customized book coaching to dedicated writers. And we meet you where you are and get you, our goal is to get you to a rough draft. And our hope is that the rough draft is stronger than it would have been without us. We give weekly accountability and feedback. I'm also a private book coach, and my clients are doing really well out in the real world, landing top agents and getting book deals. And I'm a writer myself of 8 books and trying to be 9. So hi, Diana, Matthew, Amy, thank you guys for letting us know you're here. My guest today is Laraine Herring, and Laraine has a brand new book that's just out, and here it is. It's on being stuck, and it's just come out. The subtitle's Tapping into the Creative Power of Writer's Block. And
in May. It's out in 2 weeks.
Oh, but you can order it now.
You can order it now. Yes. May the 17th is the release date.
Like in my mind, when you can order a book on Amazon, it's real.
No, you can't change it then. It's over.
Right? It's not going to not happen. Forget you can't actually read it. You can buy it. I do highly recommend it. It's such an interesting and rich and wonderful book, very unlike a lot of things I think anybody will have heard about. So that's the book. And just a little about Laraine. She is has been deeply entrenched in the writing world for a very long time. She has 25 years of teaching experience and runs the creative writing program at Yavapai College in Prescott, Arizona. I had to read that. Did I say it right? Yavapai. She has 7 published books. She's got 8 years of formal education, including an MFA. And she has a very interesting background in psychology, which we'll talk about in a minute. So she's got a wide-ranging, deep breadth of experience in writing and publishing and teaching. So Laraine, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate it.
Yay. So I wanted to start out by talking about your background because it's just such an interesting thing. So you got an MFA and then you got a master's in psychology after you got the MFA. And I just would love for you to talk a little bit about the connection between those two things. You studied grief counseling in
yeah, grief counseling was my thing.
Yeah. So
if you ever want to clear a room, say you're a grief counselor.
Yeah, right. But can you just talk a little bit about the connection, that like crossroads between psychology and writing?
Yeah. So I got my MFA in about 20 years ago now. And as I started to teach creative writing more and more and work on my own work, I realized that even if people were writing fiction, even if they were working on, novels, they were certainly bringing in the questions and the challenges that they were personally dealing with, whether their characters were, aliens or, historical novels or whatever it was. They still, the questions were relevant and pertinent to them that their characters were studying or were struggling with. And I realized in order to be an effective or to be the most effective teacher for them, I needed to understand much more about how the human mind worked, how humans develop, how we work together, and how we work in conflict, and so that's what initially sent me back to get that degree. I wanted to be a better teacher of writing. I wanted to understand story better, and I knew I needed to understand people better. So,
and did that work?
well, yeah, I think it did work. Because it helps you take fiction from being just a plot, this happens to this happens and this happens, then this happens, to something that has the dimensionality and the depth that you want, because when you understand why people do what they do, even if they don't know why they do what they do, I mean, just even knowing that as a writer, that humans have motivations that they're not conscious of, can help, fuel your characters and the journey in your book. And I think it certainly helped me create safer spaces in retreat centers and in classrooms, and understand more how to help, just provide feedback and support for people in a way that was going to be supportive and help them grow while not, causing harm. I mean, everyone has that workshop horror story, and I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be that teacher that shut down someone in a
workshop horror story for people who maybe haven't been in a workshop or haven't experienced that, like what that horror looks like or sounds like.
Well, I had an instructor in graduate school who told me to stop writing.
Oh, well, that's pretty bad.
So there was that. And that was pretty something. So I have, used that in sometimes a less than stellar way to motivate myself, because it was like, really? Okay, I'm going to take that and do something with it. And
what were they responding to? What were they responding to?
It was a chapter of my novel. It was the workshop class. So it was a chapter of my novel in the workshop.
And they actually said you should stop writing?
The instructor.
But on what basis were they saying that? Like,
didn't like the content, I think. I don't know. It was one of those like, wow, it wasn't my first workshop by any stretch of the imagination. It was like, it was gobsmacking. And
bizarre.
All right.
Wow. That's
all right. That's a lot. So, but I hear more of it with artists, people who they put their pain, they get, the instructor will come in and just, no, and that's hard.
I actually run into a lot of people who had that kind of a shutdown experience when they were young, like a elementary school teacher who says, throw this out, or, you don't know what we're doing, which is baffling to me, but how many people have had that experience? But
I think if I had heard that at 8 or 9 years old instead of that 35, it might have been, really, really devastating. But I was old enough and had been, in the field long enough to be like, yeah, all right, I'm not going to take that and let it crush me. But it could have.
Yeah. It reminds me of, are you familiar with the musical A Chorus Line? there's this great song in a chorus line where I can't remember the character's name, but they sing about a acting teacher who says you'll never be an actress, and then that character and then what he says is you'll never be an actress because you don't know how to feel anything, and then that person dies. That acting teacher actually dies, and the character, you know, it's a beautiful thing because she says she cries because she felt nothing, which is of course not actually.
Wow. Yeah.
It's an amazing song if anybody knows that musical. So I want to talk about one of the principal concepts of your book, and I'm going to hold it up again. People can go check it out on Amazon, on Being Stuck by Laraine Herring. One of the principal concepts is just this idea of when you're stuck, noticing what that is like, noticing where you're feeling it in two places. One would be your body and one would be your head. And so much of what you talk about in the book is based on that idea that you can actually feel or experience writer's block. So could we take those two things one at a time? Could you talk about, well, you told me when we were preparing for this amazing story, the Girl Scout story about what it feels like in your head when you're stuck.
Mm-hmm. I think that, so this Girl Scout story is when I was teaching at a camp up here, and it was with 8, 9, 10-year-old girls, and it was just writer's camp. And we were doing just an exercise on the picnic tables, and this little girl, she just lights up and she puts her pen down and she's like, there are people in my head. And she was so incredibly excited to realize that. And this wasn't about blocking for her, this was about feeling free and finally like, oh, there's something that's going on as I'm writing that doesn't have anything to do with me, that has some other, you know, and I don't pretend to know that I know where it comes from or what the muse is or anything like that, but that there's something that was fueling her creativity. And she had, when she stepped out, I think she was demonstrating like that flow state, when you step out of your own way and you're able to be present with what is happening rather than be in resistance to what is happening. That's where that joy comes in. And that's when you feel like, and I'm sure everyone has felt that from time to time as you're writing, when you're just really in the zone. And the zone is simply being in the present moment with the creative process. That's, you know, it's nothing super fancy. It's just being awake with what you're doing instead of 10 pages down the line, or what you got to do at work, or what's going to, you know, happen for dinner, or what's on Facebook, or, you know, all those things that tangle up our heads as we try to think in the past, in the present, and in the future at the same time. And that's going to grind the gears. You know, that's going to make it to where you stop.
So what that girl was experiencing, you describe as flow, and there's that amazing book. Have you read that book, Flow?
Oh yeah, and I can't say the name, Haley.
Oh, I know. The book is called
Haley. I can never say his name.
And he's got an incredibly difficult to pronounce name. Maybe one of you guys in the chat can go get that name and grab it from Amazon and put it up.
CZ. It's Haley, and then CZ.
Yeah, I'm always afraid to go out when I'm doing the chat that I'm going to crash it. So the book Flow is about being in the zone and when everything else falls away. And I think that writers, one of the reasons we like to write is that we can access that place. And that when people talk about the escape of writing, or the therapeutic value of writing, I think that's often what they're referring to, is that they can get to that place. But so this girl that you were working with was feeling that, which I love. But so what's interesting is that the way she described it is there's voices in my head. So sometimes those voices are not good for our writing.
Sometimes those voices are not from your creative work. They're from other people in your life. They're from your own fears, your own we all have these ways of getting in our own way, these ways of self-sabotaging ourselves, and those voices can loom really large and drown out that creative process, and I think, with writing, maybe more than some other art forms, so much of what we do is alone. And you're in your room or you're in the coffee shop or wherever, and you're doing your work, and we see the product, but we don't see the process. If we were going to learn to dance, we could go watch dancers, and we could learn from watching people actually dance. But watching another writer write doesn't give you a whole lot. They're just, here's how they hold their pen. Here's how they, type on the keyboard. And because the writing is happening internally. And so we don't have models in ways that other art forms do. So then you sort of, I think, feel like you've got your own head that's crazy. And there's nothing, no one else's head is quite as bizarre as yours. And so that it's easy to sort of fall into that.
That's so beautiful. I was writing down what you were saying. We see the product, but not the process. It's so true. And people sometimes try to capture the process, and I'm just smiling because I'm writing a book about a writer, and it's a problem. We don't see the process in other people. We don't see what's going on in their head. And sometimes what you're describing is that the place where we're stuck is in our head, that
right.
We're experiencing that or feeling that is in those voices of doubt, or that, can come from other places.
You can watch, I grew up in theater and doing plays, and I love theater. And where it goes from day one, when you first do a dry read through of the script, to it becoming something that's completely alive by the end of 6 weeks or 10 weeks or however long it is. You can watch that whole process. You watch everyone, flub the lines. You watch the cues not come in. You watch the set fall apart. You watch all these things to get to the end. And then you're still seeing things that aren't working right in the live performance if you've known, kind of how it was supposed to be. But we don't have a model for that in writing, because we just see the product, and then it's like, oh, they just sat down and wrote it. Poof. It was this book, and it was fantastic. And I hear from my students all the time about revision, and there's sort of this huge misbelief around revision, that if they were really good enough, they wouldn't have to revise.
Oh.
And which is like, which is so, I don't know where that comes from. Other than maybe the idea that you just see the finished book, and you think that you can do it. So you just, like, they start with word 1 and end with word, 100,000, and it was all in the right order and it all fit. And then they sold it, and then they got $1 million. And then, it's like this very, very interesting mythology that I think also contributes to blocks, because it's not realistic. And there's no, if you don't study the craft, you might not know how long it takes. We can see how long it takes to become, a virtuoso cellist. We can see how long that takes. We can see how long it takes to become a professional athlete. It's, it's harder to see. So then it's harder to have some concrete image to kind of guide you and to measure yourself against as you work on your own books.
So the other place where you talk about the noticing, so in your book, you have a recurring exercise or activity in each chapter that's called a deep inquiry practice, and I love everything about that. The deep inquiry and the practice all together is wonderful. But you talk a lot about noticing those voices in your head, noticing when they're shutting you down, noticing where they're coming from, noticing that they're a problem. And you also talk a lot about when we have that awareness of being stuck in our actual bodies. And some of the deep inquiry practices are about releasing that, or feeling it and releasing that in our bodies, which is very yoga-based idea. And I know you have a lot of I started making a list and then I stopped, but in the book you reference, Hindu mythology, Chinese zodiac, different yoga disciplines, you know, a lot of Eastern practices. And these are all practices that have very much to do with the way things feel in the body. So can you talk a little bit about that, about just how writer's block can manifest in the body, how we can be aware of it?
Mm-hmm. There's a really good book, came out, I think it's probably been 20 years now, by John Lee, called Written on the Body. Written on the Body. And he's talking about how our life experiences are stored in our cells. Written on the body. Are stored in our cells and in our bones, our bodies. And so when we, our bodies are just this incredible minefield for our own storytelling, you know, whether we're doing memoir or novel or poetry or what have you, we have been marked by everything that we've experienced. And so sometimes those markings, those places of trauma, if it's trauma, can certainly create can create pain, can create, you know, tension in the shoulder. I mean, I have sort of this chronic, you know, weird shoulder thing, and, you know, things just get trapped. And the breath can be a really great, you know, grounding device. In using pranayama is the yogic term to breathe into these places of stuckness, these places of tightness. But for me, as an approach to writers, it's really so much about trying to help writers move from their heads all the way down into the body, into the belly, into the feet, back down to the earth, and really anchoring and grounding themselves here, because it's so easy to just fly away and get then so abstract and so, you know, unrooted. And stories exist in dimensionality. They exist in the mud and the swamp and the ground, and, you know, all of the senses that surround us, you know, regardless of genre. The stories exist there, you know, not an abstract treatise on love or war or famine or, you know, all of that. That's not where story is. Story is in the body, in the landscape of all of our stuff. And it's really easy, you know, to go back to that distraction piece when we hit something that's uncomfortable or that's a place of discomfort, to just go, whoo, all right, how can I shift this feeling? And, you know, the yoga's not about standing on your head. Yoga's about, you know, incorporating different practices to help you be with what's going on in your mind, be with the fluctuations of the mind, and be at ease with those fluctuations, rather than trying to deflect every time something comes up that you want to deflect from. And so, you know, I think when you're writing, your writing is going to be pulling you. This is my idea, is that our writing pulls us forward, you know, and I certainly have found that to be true for myself. The books that I write are like 10 steps ahead of me in terms of my own growth and development. And it's like, there's something in that book that's helping me evolve to become more open, more, you know, something. It's addressing, it's like, all right, we can look at this now. And the characters are somehow helping me move forward. And so if you think about a book that you've read that was really, you know, impactful for you, it's likely because it helped shift something in you. It helped open up a new perspective about, you know, human beings, about love, about something that was near and dear to your own heart. Something shifted for you. And in order for that to happen, the writer of that book had to go through that journey for him or herself before they had to go into their own dark and bring it back. They had to do that journey piece, so that then they're offering, you know, here's what I went down into the cave, and here's what I came back with, so that then you, me, and all of us as readers can go to the bookstore and find this book that's like, oh my God, this book just changed everything for me. Wow. And so what if the writer hadn't had the courage or the fortitude or the discipline to stay with the story enough to create the gift that then gets brought back to the world? You know, but it's a big thing. We have to go first. We have to make the art first. And so that's going to, raise up all of the things that are resistances to doing that work. Maybe all the reasons why we haven't addressed these issues before, or thought about these things before, or kept repressing them before. Art's like, hey, here, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. Writing is part of your life. Writing is your companion, as one of your companions in this world. And I like to think of it as a friend, as someone who's pushing me and pulling me and supporting me to go to places where maybe I'd rather just, watch Netflix.
Oh my gosh, this is so profound. I just love the way you talk about this. This is so outstanding, because what you're describing is why it's so painful.
It's hard. It is. It's hard.
It's hard. And some people don't understand that. It's like, well, I'm just sitting down and writing a story about dragons. For some reason, I keep using my example. Right. Or, I just want to write this little beach read or whatever it is, but it's never easy.
It's never. Yeah. No, because it's calling you up. It's calling you up. It's calling you out and pulling you forward, and so, anything, you can just apply that process to the Joseph Campbell hero's journey idea too. Like, everyone resist till you can't resist anymore. And then, woo, all right, now I need to do something else. And I can no longer, how hard it is when you realize something to unrealize it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're like, oh gosh, now I know that this is not the right move for me. Or now I know that this is the wrong job for me, or oh my gosh, this relationship's not working. And once you get it, you really have to expend a lot of energy to forget that you just realized that. And I think that's one of the things that goes on in writer's block too. We start to realize some things through our characters, or and I'm just speaking of fiction primarily because that's but through our work that that's causing us to have to look at some things that we've maybe placed a lot of energy in, either pretending like we don't already know or deflecting away from in our in our world. It's so easy to distract ourselves, and I certainly can't sit here and say, I never look at Facebook and I never look at it. I never, I have to figure out all these ways too. Like, yeah, turn on this and get away from this and go do this work over here. And how am I tripping myself up? It's like this constant, oh, okay, you're doing that again. All right. And look at myself and my own weirdness with sort of that happy little smile, that little small smile at the corners of your mouth, where you're not judging yourself. You're just like, aren't you kind of a cute person? Like, look at what you're doing. Let's maybe do something different, make a different choice, loving myself, loving my art, loving, with this openness, rather than, God, Laraine, you did it again. Like, you screwed up this writing schedule for yourself again, and you can't do, you never do what you say. You never, those different kinds of ways of speaking to ourselves is really important to stay with the work as well, because we are human, and sometimes you just want to watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So having a kind of compassion for yourself in the process, it sounds like is critical. So we've talked about how noticing our blocks that are in our head and those voices in our head, and we've talked about feeling it in our body and not being afraid of those, leaning into those discomforts. I wanted to talk a little bit about, you speak in the book about two kinds of writer's blocks. So we just talked about two places where you can feel the block, but the two types of blocks that you talk about, I wanted to ask if you would read us a little bit about that. And now I am finding the page in the book where I'm going to ask you to read. Maybe you know it better than I do. Oh, I got it. It's page 20. It is. Yeah. 22. Yeah. So this chapter is called Understand the Type of Block You're Working With. And there are two kinds. And if you could just pick out, I know I'm kind of asking you to do this on the fly, but a few lines to read about the two different kinds of writing blocks that people might encounter. One, while you're scanning, I'll read the headlines. One is writer in process, and one is work in process. So these are the two different kinds of blocks that you describe writers might experience. So have I given you enough of a...
Yeah. Glasses, got it. Putting the right exact amount of feet away from my face so I can. So I was when I was trying to think about how I have watched writer's block manifest in my students and in myself over these years, it seemed to fall into these two general categories, and certainly there's overlap, but these general categories. And the first one, writer in process, this is your inner stuff. This is you evolving as a writer. So what I said was writer in process blocks occur when you're working on your book and the book is requiring you to face parts of yourself or your beliefs about the book. So that could be your beliefs about, is it gonna, be a bestseller, or, oh my God, my family's still alive, they can't read it. And that's a block right there, like what's gonna happen to that. Some things about the book you'd rather not acknowledge. These may relate to what you believe being a writer is or isn't, or how you feel others may respond to your work. They may be fears, patterns of behavior, such as procrastination or perfectionism, or unresolved personal issues. So this is your inner development coming up, that surfaces. And then the second one, work in progress blocks, have to do more with the craft side of things. Like you don't know how to work with an omniscient point of view, but your book clearly needs to be told in a third person omniscient point of view, and it's too, you just don't have the skills yet. So my example with this is about trying to drive a stick shift, which I can't do. I've never been able to learn how to drive a car with a standard transmission. Many brave people have tried to teach me in their own cars, no less, but to no avail. I understood what to do. I memorized the order of the gears and which foot is supposed to do what, but because I've been driving with an automatic transmission since 1984, I have no idea what to do when forced to relate to gears in a different way. So it's like and I think this is true for any book you start too. Like you've written one book, the next book's going to be totally different. It's going to bring up different things. It's going to require you to do different, have different craft challenges and different, ways of working with the art form itself. And, and so if you've learned to drive a stick shift, and most people can do it, but when you're trying to do everything at once, you just grind the gears and you stall. You can't go farther, you can't go forward, and you just hear this horrible sound and you're like, oh my God, I'm 40 years old and oh my God, I've been driving for all these years. And so it's really was about not knowing what to do, not being comfortable with those muscles. Sometimes students will say, I only write in first person because that's what I love. Okay, but what that does is that limits your storytelling to only the kinds of stories that fit with a first person point of view. It doesn't allow you to stretch as an artist into the whole. It's such a huge, I'll never live long enough to understand all that writing is and can be and all that the craft can be. And so, we sort of can self-limit. I'm not good at that, so I'm not even gonna try that. And that limits our stories and our ability to do our creative work. And sooner or later, a story's gonna come along that's gonna force you to learn how to do something different. You're writing a fantasy all of a sudden, and you've never thought you were going to do that, or it's some epic family saga, or it's historical, or it's science fiction, or it's dystopian, or whatever it is, and it's coming to you, and you can't do much about it. It's like the not knowing what you know thing I just said. It's like when you know you have a story, it also takes Herculean effort to forget that you have a story in you. And that causes a lot of suffering, I think, when we're like, no, I don't have, it's not there. And then we push that story away and we get really busy because it's so easy to be busy. And that story just knocks and knocks and knocks and knocks and knocks until, we answer or we die. We're done, and I don't want to be, because eventually we're all going to die. So I don't want to be at the end of my life and not have heard all the knocks, not have responded to all the knocks.
That is so great. So on page 97, Laraine, you talk about what so we started talking about what writer's block feels like. Now we just finished talking about the two kinds of writer's block, which is blocks in your own process and blocks having to do with the project itself. And on page 97, you talk about how this is a list of things that it can look like sometimes, signals that you're blocked or signs that you are stuck or having a problem. And I just love this list because it goes off of what you were just talking about. Would you read a couple of those to us?
Yeah, and I think this is also about, there's signals that are showing up for you because you're about to really get something awesome. And so it's based off of this idea that, within the block, within the shadow, within the dark lies the greatest gift. And if we, don't turn away from it and rather dive into it, then we'll hear what that is about. So some of these are a perpetual need to start the book over. It's like, all right, this is wrong, I'm going to start again. This is wrong. I'm a big believer in getting that first draft just out of you, and then you go back and revise and shape and all that sort of stuff. But if you're always going back to page one over and over and over and over and over again, that could be a signal for that. Physiological changes as you start your writing process, such as sore muscles, an upset stomach, or sleep disruptions, ways that your own body is sort of like, yeah, something's coming, I'm gonna, because as far as our body's concerned, all is awesome because we're alive. So when we try to make a change, there's sometimes this resistance, even if it's a positive change, because the body thinks it's, yay, it works. You're awake. Negative self-talk was a pretty obvious one. Jealousy over other writers' successes, I think, is a really big one. That starts to turn your focus of your book and your work onto our feelings of disappointment in our own progress, maybe in our own careers and our own choices or whatever, onto other people's successes and caring. And you can hear this a lot in circles when you go to readings and such, when people are getting a little snarky about other writers. And it was hard for them too. It's like kind of what it's, it was hard to write a book. The kind of comments also like, nobody ever publishes anything good anymore. Everything the publishing industry is putting out there is crap and dumbed down and all of that. That's another way of deflecting from and making excuses for, it's a self-sabotage technique, making excuses for why no agents picked up your book, or why you feel like you can't sell your book well. Clearly no one recognizes my brilliance, and so these are real signs that I look for when I hear students and people talking. It's like, okay, that's because no one owes me the recognition of my brilliance. Like no one in the world doesn't owe that to me. Yeah. I have to earn that. I have to earn my place at the table and not. Yeah. New project-itis, I'll end with that one. So as soon as a book starts to get some resistance or get some things building up in it, we're like, oh, here's a new shiny thing. I call them cheese crumbs. You put the mouse in the maze and you keep dropping cheese crumbs, and the mouse will turn to follow the cheese crumbs. Like it'll lose focus on the end of the maze and like, oh, this. So it's like, what's this next shiny thing? What's this next thing? There's always some new shiny thing. And part of the reason why it's new and shiny is because you haven't attempted to work with it yet. So it only lives in its perfection in your head. And
so it's not, right?
It's not alive yet. It's an illusion.
Yeah, it's not alive yet. I want to ask you actually to read the one on the next page, the top one on the next page. I think it's such a big one.
Time stuffing.
Yeah.
You figure out ways to overschedule yourself so that there's simply no time to write. And then I think people are really busy. A lot of my students have 2 or 3 jobs. They're raising kids. People are doing a lot of things. But a lot of things that fill our time don't have to fill our time, and it's about making choices and learning how to say no and setting priorities and setting boundaries around what matters to you. So that at the end of the day, and it's the put your oxygen mask on yourself before assisting others thing, I'm a better wife I'm a better teacher. I'm a better cat owner. I'm a better person all around when I'm doing my creative work. When I don't hold to my own boundaries, or when I don't give that a space to be, I see it in my own behavior. I'm not the person you want to be around. I'm not a good teacher. I'm resenting my students. I'm resenting my husband. And it's because I didn't hold to my own space and hold to what it's like food for me. I never forget to eat. So, it's like holding to what really does make me the best possible Laraine, and writing is a big piece of that. So I have a responsibility to create the conditions and the space for that to be a part of my life on a consistent basis. Obviously, sometimes we have to take care of people who are sick, and we have, the things like that, but just within, there's always a reason not to do something. And
you're so quotable. I'm like writing down everything. I love it. So
maybe my dad died young, and that was really one of those big moments, obviously, for me. And so I don't think I ever believed in you get 90 years of health and the ability to do what you want. So I've always sort of felt this real urgency to use time in a way that's going to help me, and I'm not perfect at all, but it's been a real big guiding, light for me. Like, all right, what do you want to do today? And how is it helping you either with your book? Is it helping you with your teaching? Is it helping you with your relationships? Is it helping you with your health, your physical health? How are these things helping rather than not? And it means you have to take responsibility for your own path instead of letting other people will fill your time if you let them. So you have to be sure that the people in your life are also helping hold up your life in some way and helping your life be fuller, because they get taken. And then you're like, oh, what happened? And I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for my students. And our world needs art so bad, and needs people willing to create things and share things and be willing to be vulnerable. And it seems like there's only just being shot back with mean stuff online when you're saying something. It's always, it's scarier now to put yourself out there, and we just need our art. If we're artists, our art is part of what makes us awesome. Someone who's a cancer researcher, that's part of their thing. That's part of not putting down anything else. It's just that if writing is your thing, it's one of your things that makes you the best possible you. And so care of it and create the space for it and the time for it. Wow. That's my biggest hope with the book, I think. Yeah. That people will rise up and realize or take the steps necessary to not be haunted by what they haven't written.
That's so beautiful. I'm mindful of the time. I mean, we could talk about this for days. Part of me wishes we had scheduled to talk about it for days, because this is so awesome. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the strategies for moving past blocks. You've touched on a lot of things through the conversation, which is great. But do you want to maybe pick two of your favorite strategies for moving past the block that are the most potent or effective strategies? I know before we talked, well, I don't know, do you want to share your monkey or like what?
Yeah, because that was what I was going to say. When you said pick two, that was one. And then the other one is the dialogue. So the dialogue process.
Okay.
So I you can get these little monkeys at the dollar store. Everybody has a dollar, I think, and they're $1, and they're really amazingly cute. And I'll bring these to my my classes and my workshops and help students create then a persona. So this becomes the representation of their writing, and so they're charged for the semester to take care of this monkey, right? And they're so cute. So it's like really hard to be mean to the monkey. Like if you're gonna, people will, when they're gonna read their work, they'll say, oh, well, this isn't very good or whatever. And it's like, say that to this little face, right? Tell him or her that as they're becoming your book, that they're not good enough. Like, I know you're not that mean. So it helps you learn to, talk to yourself with more compassion, talk to your work with more compassion, because I really think this is a way to help cultivate a relationship with the source of your writing, so that when you go into that room or turn on your laptop or whatever, that you're really meeting something concrete and something tangible. You're not just, oh my God, it's my book and it's just this big amorphous thing and I don't really know where to start. It's just like meeting a friend for coffee. And so there's, I have like 6 of them sitting up here on top of my computer screen. And because they just, so it's about falling in love with the source of your work and just creating some persona.
I have to stop and ask you, like, if there's people here who are rolling their eyes, or
I'm sure there always are. There always are. I realize it's ridiculous.
I know we have some men on the call here. Like, you've certainly had those kinds of people in your class as well. What can you describe what happens when you explain this to them and they roll their eyes?
They do roll their eyes, and it's okay. And I try to be funny. I try to be likable first, so that they like me, so that then maybe they're willing to, like the crazy. I'm known as the crazy monkey lady on campus. And it doesn't have to be a monkey. So sometimes I'll come back in with, with a stuffed penguin or something that they had, and but it's just something. It could be a shape. It could be something that you're able to form a relationship with and be concretized with, where it's not an abstraction. It's a real thing that you can love. And so the monkey doesn't work for everybody. If the monkey doesn't think so, if the monkey doesn't, there's all kinds of ways that you can do this. You can draw a picture, an image, whatever. Just trying to hand out something, kind of fun in the beginning. And most of the time they'll come around. More likely, they've come in with their own animals. I had a guy in Yellow Springs when I did a workshop in Yellow Springs last summer, and I was out shopping in the street during one of the breaks, and he's like, "You're the monkey lady." And Yellow Springs is such an interesting place. You're the monkey lady, and he wasn't in my workshop or anything. I don't know how he found out. And he pulls out this animal from behind his counter, and it was a jewelry shop. He's like, "I've carried this with me since," I'm like, "Oh, I love Yellow Springs." But besides, besides any of that, there's like a chance to be silly. It's clearly silly. And if you're feeling silly and if you're laughing, you're more relaxed. You're not like, I've got to write the best book ever, or I'm in competition with my students or with my group, or it's like, it's just silly. And
I have to ask,
are coming from play.
Can you throw your monkey across the room if you're mad?
Well, they're very soft and squishy. I'm going to throw you.
So let's talk about
and then the other one is a dialogue process. It's a deep inquiry dialogue process that is based in a couple of different traditions. People might be most familiar with it from Jungian work. But when you reach this place of stuckness in your writing or what have you, you can pick some item or character or situation to dialogue with. And two really key questions are, what do you need and how can I help? And so say I'm going to dialogue with, say I have a character named Judy in my novel and I don't know what she's doing or what's going on. I can ask that character if it's a fear, if it's about my mom reading my memoir or something like that, I can move into that space and ask that fear, ask that resistance. It's about really using our own inner wisdom to flip that resistance and turn it into the offering. So those 2 key questions: what do I need and what do you need and how can I help? And you would answer from the perspective of what you were dialoguing with, whether it was character or could even be the book itself. You don't know what you're writing about. You don't understand what this book is. Hello, book. And just kind of see how so much of my whole practice is about being in relationship with everything. and believing that everything that I'm in relationship with is there in some way to support me and make my work better rather than get in the way of my work. It's just about how do I speak to it? If I yell at it, if I, we don't respond well when we're yelled at, most of us, as opposed to being asked and actively listened to makes a lot of, difference. I'm reading Matthew and I'm cracking up.
Oh, I know. That's funny.
Let's do what the monkey. There's a line there. I think that you want to. He says, "Must do what the monkey tells me."
So I'm going to put up the link to your website, which is just LaraineHerring.com. But you also have a site about the monkeys that people can access through the Laraine Herring site. So that's a good thing to check out as well. I want to end by asking you to read the beautiful quote on page 151, just about valuing the work. And then we have a few minutes and we'll see if there are any questions from our listeners. So do you know the one I'm talking about, the passage?
On 151, that second paragraph? Is that the one?
Yeah, so beautiful.
The distractions paragraph?
Yeah. Well, also I love the next one though. How about do the third one down? When the silence has grown.
When the silence has grown loud in your writing life, let the thoughts in, but allow them to pass through, unencumbered by your attachments. They're only thoughts. They arise and dissolve all on their own. When you can't shake a thought, it's because you haven't let it leave your grasp. The next time you find yourself attached to a thought, smile, inhale deeply and blow that thought away. It's only hanging on because you are. So you know how you can make yourself happy or sad or mad or whatever, and nothing's actually happening, you do it with your own head. And you're like, we can make ourselves feel all these things, and we're doing all of that. So we can, this is behaviorism in action, we learn how to do that. We can unlearn how to do that also and not attach to the thoughts that don't serve us and don't, they just pass through. We're the ones that are like, whoo, and then hang on and then make a whole big story about it. Oh, my friend just sold her novel, so and then make a story about it, or, whoo, and that's us. And we can just, return to the work. Create the work, create the body of work, tell the stories that are in you to tell, engage actively and compassionately in the community that you want to be a part of, be part of the ecosystem of writers, support us at readings, buy books, however you buy them, but buy them, read them, be supportive of the field you want to play in. And that's easier than hating on it and comparing yourself to it and, kind of keeping yourself outside of it, because you can be in it and happier, I think.
That's beautiful. What an awesome place to end. So if you all who are here in the chat would like to ask Laraine any particular questions about the things she's spoken of, or your own work or your own stuckness, please let us hear those. We would love to answer them. Laraine, do you have any events coming up or workshops coming up where you're working with these ideas with people? I know you teach at the Kripalu Center, the yoga retreat center. It's in the Berkshires, right?
It's in the Berkshires, yeah. And I always go on New Year's, so it's snowing a lot of the time. And then going next year, I think it's January 6th through the 8th. It's a weekend workshop at Kripalu in Massachusetts.
And is it just writing, or is it writing and yoga?
It's writing and there's movement, but it's not a yoga practice. It's just we're using writing as a way to help people move through blocks. And that's the next one. That's the most recent one that I've got.
That's awesome. Matthew has a question. And Kemlo actually said, I love Kripalu. So Kemlo, you should know that Laraine, this book was birthed at Kripalu, and she opens the book with a really beautiful story about being actually stuck there, like by by the
It was the polar vortex. I couldn't get home. I was stuck there for 6 days. I live in Arizona. It was like I couldn't go. I didn't have enough clothes. I didn't have enough. I mean, it was like, there are worse places to be stuck, but I was nonetheless.
Yeah, but I just love that you were stuck in paradise, and that's where this book came from.
Being uncomfortable, being stuck in paradise. So there's that. There's that clarity about it.
Matthew asks, do you use any self-assigned rewards punishments like carrots and sticks?
I don't do punishments so much, but yeah, it's like, all right, here's an hour of your work, and then you can go look at that pair of shoes, or I love shoes. You can go like you can do that, or you can, kind of bargaining in that way, but I don't take stuff away. I don't use that, but I do try to find ways to, help the motivation when it's not there.
Right.
There's some I don't remember what it's called, where they charge you money. You set up word goals. I think it's word goals.
Yeah.
And they set up money. And and it goes to a charity, but it's still money. You can pick the charity that you'll be donating to if you don't meet your word goal. But that's an interesting approach too. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. I just want to make sure before we get to Lacey's question, Kemlo, Laraine is also the author of a book that I want to make sure I write down correctly. Writing. What's the book about?
Writing Begins with the Breath is one. Writing Begins with the Breath, and then The Writing Warrior is the second one.
Right. So Writing Begins with the Breath is one of her books, and the writing. Oh my gosh, do you spell warrior with an O? Warrior at the end. O-R.
I think it's O-R. No. It's O-R. Yeah, it's O-R. She's pronouncing it. Chick sent me Haley.
Oh my gosh, Barbara, you've just changed my entire life. That's how you say the author of the name Flo. Wow. I'm so pleased. Okay, so Lacey's question. There's a disclaimer at the beginning of every story. This is a work of fiction. All similarities to real people are coincidence. How do we write what we know if it's all fiction?
I don't actually agree with the write what you know idea so much. I think we write what we're curious about, or we write what we don't understand. And I think that's a statement that gets sort of interpreted. Like, I would only write about middle-aged white women living in the Southwest, if I only wrote about my own experience and what I knew about that. I think the write what you know piece, and I think where it has a lot of resonance, is you're working with questions, with injustices, with ideas, with themes that are very personally relevant to you, that you have sort of spent your life, coming around to terms with or something. I mean, if you can read Toni Morrison, you can read all of her novels, and she has 4 or 5 themes and questions that keep coming up. It's like she's turning the same theme, like a rock in a rock tumbler, and it becomes a new way of looking at this particular theme. So I think we have these issues that are sort of ours that keep getting explored, and that's the write what you know piece, more than the literal house, the people, the streets, that sort of stuff. That's there's literal truth, and then there's heart truth, or that's underneath that we can. That's why we connect to things like Game of Thrones and science fiction books and things that we can't go, oh my gosh, that's real. I can go out and see Khaleesi and her dragons. You can't, but we're connected to maybe, wow, there's a lot of feminist issues going on with Khaleesi and those dragons, and what's going on as she's trying to be her stuff. That's the truth part, and that's the what you know part.
That's so good. That is so good. And I've written fiction about that thing where you talked about, you get into a place and you don't know how to get out of it, and you either gonna block it or you're gonna go through. I was writing a novel where all of a sudden I was writing about a photographer, and I remember thinking, I can't do this. I'm not a photographer. I don't understand f-stops and focus lengths, and I'm not gonna go learn all this. I don't care about this. I guess I can't write this book. And then I decided to do it, and interviewed photographers and I hung out in camera stores, and the whole time I was thinking, I don't have a right to do this. Somebody who's a photographer should do this. And, you know, finally I pushed through all that and wrote the story, and you know, I'm very proud of that story. So that was a case of something I wrote about, something I knew nothing about, but there was a truth in that process of photography that I was, you know, attracted to, that it wouldn't leave me. So yeah, I totally get that.
There were questions, I'm sure, in that book that were relevant to you.
Yeah,
You know, there were questions that book was exploring that were very real and awake and alive for you.
And what's hilarious is this happened to me several times. It happened with that book, and it happened with another book where I was writing about a seamstress. And the seamstress one was particularly funny. Is my novel called The Threadbare Heart. And when it came out, I got all these requests to do interviews on sewing sites. And
oh, wow.
I don't know very much about the internet, but these sewing sites are massive. I mean, there's like,
huge. I know.
These quilting sites, there's like hundreds of thousands of people, and there are these rock stars in the quilting world, these whole things, and they wanted to interview me about my sewing life and like where I learned to sew and what, and I was like, okay, I don't sew. I can't do this. I can't do your interview. I don't sew. And they wouldn't believe me, you know, and it was, it's fascinating because I captured something about sewing that felt real to the people who really do it. But and like you said, it wasn't about like what kind of thread to use. It was, what I wrote a lot about was actually how my character stored her fabric. And it turned out that that's something that just is a very deep thing for a lot of seamstresses. And I knew that because I had interviewed all these seamstresses, and they would always end up talking about their stash, their fabric stash, and where they store it, how they label it. Is it by color? Is it by kind of fabric? Is it by where they got the fabric? You know, and it was like I tapped into something that they felt was real. So who knows?
Wow. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So are there any other questions, you guys? Because we're happy to answer them. We have a couple more minutes, and this has just been awesome, Laraine. I'm gonna share this this webinar far and wide, because I think every writer needs to think about this. And
thank you. It's been a real pleasure. It's nice to talk about it, and like to my monkeys who are sitting right here looking at me. So.
I kind of want to ask you to turn your camera around so we can see all your monkeys, but if they're sitting up there, you can't.
They're up on because the camera's like they're looking over where the camera, they're perching.
Well, you'll have to take a picture and tweet that out so we can well, thank you all for coming and joining us today, and we'll be sending the recording out if you would like to hear it again. And thank you so much, Laraine. This was amazing. And one last time, on Being Stuck by Laraine Herring. It's available on Amazon, and LaraineHerring.com is her website, and there's lots of really wonderful stuff on there. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Bye.